The Great Sphinx of Egypt is the world's most famous ancient monument, 240 feet long and 66 feet high, and carved and quarried from the natural limestone bedrock of the Giza Plateau. For millennia it's greeted those that have visited the pyramids, a truly wondrous sight to behold, standing proudly before the last remaining wonders of the ancient world. It's a monument that's played a central part in dynastic history, guarding the famous Old Kingdom necropolis of Khufu, Khafre and Menkaure. It was then revered as the god Horumaket in the New Kingdom, worshipped by Canaanite settlers as the god Horon, and honoured by the Greeks and the Romans, with numerous rounds of renovation right up until the modern era. Stone blocks were even added to the bedrock mound in the Old Kingdom, because below the neck, the quality of the limestone is really quite poor, being soft, flaky and full of cavities, and hence hard to shape on this grand scale. There is even a giant natural fissure that runs right through the body. If you were to remove the stone cladding from around the monument, as well as the crude cement that was added in the 1920s, well, you'd find a badly eroded and crumbling mass of limestone, separated in two parts and barely resembling the iconic lion-like form we know so well. But what makes the Sphinx so enigmatic? Well, of course there is a long-standing debate over its age, but there's also the question of what it's hiding. Whether you've seen some of my older videos, watched the recent video by Mr. Beast on his trip to Egypt, or seen the only open-minded Egyptologist on Joe Rogan quite recently, then you'll know there are in fact a number of openings and tunnels in and around the Great Sphinx. There's one small cavity behind the famous Dream Stele below the head, there's one at ground level at the very back of the Sphinx, there's apparently an entrance in the northern side, we find a cavity on top of the head today covered by a metal hatch, and there is also this trapdoor on its back, and these openings have created a lot of speculation over the years, mainly due to this diagram that was published many decades ago. Does one of these openings lead to the fabled Lost Hall of Records, or was someone buried inside it? What exactly is the Sphinx hiding? Well, funnily enough, a chamber was discovered inside the Sphinx, and in this video I'll tell you all about it. Hello everybody, and welcome to Ancient Architects. Please subscribe to the channel for regular content on ancient architecture, as well as all of the latest news from the world of archaeology. Many of you will have watched the recent Joe Rogan interview with Zahi Hawass. I found it a genuinely difficult watch. There were inaccuracies and inconsistencies, and they were both often at cross wires, especially when it came to the Sphinx. At 1 hour and 22 minutes into the podcast, Hawass says he found 4 tunnels inside the Sphinx. According to Hawass, the first one is behind the Dream Stele, the second behind the head in the top, which he said was 25 feet deep, and the third was in the back. Getting a bit mixed up, he then said the third one is in the tail, but I think he means that one was the fourth. He says that this one was opened in 1927 by Emil Baresi, and he has photos of workmen inside it. Well again, I think he's got a little bit mixed up, as I believe he's now referring to a fifth opening or void. Yes, there's a fifth. These are the photographs of workmen stood inside the Great Sphinx in the 1920s, but by all accounts this is not a tunnel. It's just a niche in the north side of the Sphinx, probably a bedrock cavity that's been weathered or eroded, because even in ancient times it was covered by what experts call the Phase 1 restoration blocks. But regarding the tunnels going into and under the Sphinx, Hawass said that pottery was found inside them. Pottery that was dated to the 25th dynasty, around 500 BC, and so he thinks the tunnels were created at the same time, because, according to him, the late period Egyptians thought there was something hidden beneath the Sphinx, and so they investigated by digging tunnels. But of course this is just his opinion, and it's based on a few pottery fragments. It's certainly not fact. Either way, the thing to take home is that Hawass said the tunnels lead nowhere. Now, regarding the opening that can be found at the tail, based on the published information including detailed diagrams, I agree it leads nowhere. In form, it's like one winding tunnel, but from ground level it goes both up and down. The lower section below ground ends abruptly inside the bedrock, and when it was rediscovered in the modern era it was found to be part filled with groundwater. The upward section runs between the Sphinx cladding blocks and the bedrock beneath them, but it's sadly closed off at the end. And that's because of the cement that was poured into the Sphinx by Emil Baresi in the 1920s. Whether or not this tunnel continued on, nobody knows. So now we move to the cavity in the top of the head, the one that Rogan showed on his podcast. According to the Travels of Charles Thompson, a collection of work from the 1740s, he says, quote, "We could not get up to the top of the head, but those who have done it report that there is a round hole by which a full-grown person may descend into it, from whence it is supposed the artful priests delivered their oracles." End quote. And here we have an old photograph of somebody stood inside it. It looks to be no deeper than 5 or 6 feet, but of course we can't see the bottom of the hole. The depth of the hole is confirmed by Claude Etienne Savary in 1785, saying it was only 5 feet deep, and it neither communicated with the mouth nor body of the Sphinx. It's possible the hole was partially filled with sand and rubble, because in his 1801 book, Joseph Grober said it was 9 feet deep and 15 inches in diameter. But he also noted that stones had been thrown into it, meaning it was somewhat deeper. How much deeper we don't know. The hatch that covers the hole in the top of the head is likely just there to protect it from the elements, helping to preserve the head and stop erosion. Another metal hatch can be found behind the Dream Stele, located between the paws of the Sphinx. It opens up into a small rectangular passage, and the roof of this passage where the metal hatch is fitted is entirely made up of cement, added to the structure by Baresi in the 1920s. And regarding this specific passage we don't know a lot, and that's because Emil Baresi failed to document his work in any great detail. But there are no reports or historic eyewitness accounts of tunnels leading from here. The last Sphinx opening is arguably the most interesting. It's another metal hatch, this time on the back of the monument and close to the rump. Now, this hatch is located above the natural geological fissure that runs through the Sphinx. In the 1920s, in the name of restoration, Baresi filled up this fissure with cement, but he did leave a brick-lined shaft that runs from the top of the Sphinx's back, and it goes down a number of metres. We don't have many views of the original natural fissure, but apparently the central part always looked like a crude shaft running down through the bedrock. It was documented by many antiquarians in the 17th, 18th and 19th centuries. Now, I have to shout out author Robert Temple and his book The Sphinx Mystery, because inside this book, he documents so many sources that mention the shaft. Whether you agree with the book's conclusions or not, it is a fantastic resource for those researching the Great Sphinx. So, as documented by Temple, according to Johann van Slaben, who visited Egypt in 1664 and 1672, around the rump of the Sphinx there was a cave underground, equivalent to the size of the Sphinx's head. Van Slaben saw the entrance that led into it, and believed it was likely an old burial chamber. Regarding this chamber, he said it was as tall as it was wide, which was approximately 26 feet. A few years later, and the Sphinx was visited by Ellis Ferriard, and he noted how its body was mainly buried in the sand, and how he, quote, found a subterranean vault cut out in the firm rock, end quote. In 1721, Thomas Shaw noted a square hole in the back of the Sphinx, about 4 feet long, aka 4 feet deep, and 2 feet broad. But because it was filled with sand, he couldn't see any further down. Next we go to Charles Thompson, who visited Egypt 12 years later, and he notes the hole in the back, now going down around 5 feet, but for the most part it was likely filled with sand, and it was in need of excavation. In 1739, it was mentioned by Richard Pocock, and was again noted as being 5 feet in depth. In 1817, under the direction of the British consul Henry Salt, explorer Giovanni Caviglia excavated the Sphinx on a large scale, but there are sadly no detailed records of his work. He gave his papers to Henry Salt, who did publish an account of the work, but nothing with the depth we really want to see. Some of Caviglia's papers went to the British Museum, some of them went to Florence, but it seems that many of them have been lost. But we do know that Caviglia cleared out the shaft in its entirety, and it's thanks to the 1855 writings of French archaeologist Auguste Mariette. He tells us that in 1833, amongst Caviglia's papers in Florence, English Egyptologist Charles H. Cottrell found a plan of 2 chambers discovered behind the Sphinx, and one of which contained hieroglyphic texts. On learning this, relocating the chambers became a priority, because it was thought that the hieroglyphic texts may provide answers regarding the origins of the Great Sphinx. So, Mariette was given the funds needed, and he began his own exploration project at the Sphinx. He found the body of the Sphinx to be filled with large natural hollows, with masonry added to shape the monument into a lion. He found the vertical shaft documented by the historic authors, and Mariette also gives us some very important details. At the bottom of the shaft there was a roughly hewn room, meaning yes, there is a chamber inside the Sphinx. Well, sort of. According to Mariette, it was just a natural fissure enlarged by the hands of man. In this room there were some fragments of wood, which, according to Mariette, gave off a strong smell of resin when burnt, and this led him to believe the wood came from a sarcophagus. Yep, I know what you're thinking. Why the hell did he burn the wood? But anyway, going back to Giovanni Caviglia, and as mentioned, he said there were 2 chambers towards the back of the Sphinx. One of them is likely the one located at the tail, and the other must be the one described by Mariette. There are no other known sizable openings in and around the Sphinx. But interestingly, because we know there are no hieroglyphs in the tunnel at the tail, it could well mean that Caviglia found hieroglyphs in the rough chamber at the bottom of the shaft. In 1897, the director of the German Institute in Cairo, the archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt, wrote an article and mentions, quote, the occurrence of 2 vertical shafts on the back of the Sphinx, one of which ends in a burial chamber, in which coffin boards have been found. From this we can infer the earliest existence of a mastaba on the back of the Sphinx. End quote. Sadly, in the year 2025, there are no known photographs or diagrams of the rock-cut chamber at the bottom of the shaft, and that to me really is crazy, because of how famous and how well studied the Sphinx is. But we know something is there, and we know it was considered important enough in the 1920s because Baresi kept the shaft, He shored it up with new brickwork, and he also added a metal hatch over the top. In his so-called restoration work, Baresi added crude cement wherever he could, so it was a conscious choice to keep the shaft an access point into the Sphinx to a rough but man-made chamber. But sadly, this is the only view we have into it. This is the brick-lined shaft created by Baresi, and it comes from an old documentary with Zahi Hawass. And in terms of the detail, the descriptions from historic eyewitness accounts are all we have to go on. But I think there is certainly enough to say there is a room inside the Sphinx, and even during the sloppy restoration work 100 years ago, it was believed important enough to allow access for generations to come. But with regards to the history of Giza, in the grand scheme of things, is this really significant? Well, to be honest, with the current level of knowledge it's impossible to know. According to the written accounts, it's rock cut and rough work, located at an easy access point, the position of the fissure that runs through the rump of the Sphinx, but the wooden boards do hint at a possible ancient burial. And how old is this burial? How old is the rock-cut chamber? Well, because the Sphinx has been iconic and significant in so many periods of Egyptian history, from the Old Kingdom to the New and then way, way beyond, there really is no way of knowing if the chamber inside the Sphinx is original or not. For all we know, it could have been a much later intrusive feature. But if this is the chamber with hieroglyphs noted by Caviglia, I guess the answers may well be in the writing, if of course it still survives today. It would be so fantastic to see this shaft opened again, to have somebody lowered down by rope with a camera in hand and filming the chamber below, and to conduct a 3D scan and then make the data and pictures accessible to everyone. There are so many simple research projects that could be undertaken at the Sphinx and the pyramids, and it would do nothing except generate more and more interest in ancient Egypt. Hopefully, one day, this particular research project can happen. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Ancient Architects. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel, please like the video, and please leave a comment below. Thank you very much.